What's up? It's Sierra.
Hey, it's Ebony.
And welcome to the Real Play Podcast. All right, well, welcome to the Real Play Podcast. I am Sierra, and my co-host here,
I'm Ebony.
And today we have a very special guest, Dr. Joy Stevens. Hey, Joy.
Hey, Sierra.
How are you?
Wonderful.
You looking good?
Thank you.
Looking relaxed?
I am very relaxed today.
Why are you so relaxed today?
I went to yoga, part of my self-care.
Yes, yoga. Well, Joy, we have you here today because we want to talk about a very important subject, mental health. But before we start, let me introduce you to the people because I know you because we have been sister friends, soul friends, buddies, travel
Road
homies,
dogs, yeah.
all over the country. We haven't been out of the country yet. We need to make that happen
Not
next.
yet.
Barcelona. Anyway, so I'm going to introduce you. Dr. Joy Stevens is a licensed psychologist. She received her bachelor's. Y'all, I'm going to get this together, but she received her bachelor's in psychology from the University of Dayton, her master's in mental health counseling from Purdue University, and her PhD, yes girl, in counseling psychology from Indiana University with a minor in higher education and student affairs. She currently serves as an associate director of mental health counseling at a college here in the beautiful state of Maryland. In addition, she provides therapy in a private practice where she works with millennials. Dr. Stevens is committed to multicultural counseling and strives to reduce the stigma attached to mental health services. Welcome, Dr. Stevens.
Thank you.
All right, well, let's get right into it. What made you want to go into being a psychologist?
So I always tell people that I wanted to be a psychologist since I was 9 years old. And most people find that hard to believe. But my mom was an activity therapist and worked at a mental health hospital. And so I think she was my first role model. And then when I went to college, I remember taking my first exam in Psychology 101, and I didn't do very well. And so all of a sudden I realized that this was bigger than just being like my mom. And so throughout college, had some mentors and opportunities that really kind of led me into working in higher ed and specifically focusing on counseling psychology.
That is what's up. And you like working with us millennials.
I love millennials.
You love us.
A little bit.
A lot of people give us like a hard rap because they don't understand us. But I feel like we instantly connected when I moved up here. I didn't look at you as like an older soul. I was just like, oh, that's Joy.
I'm like, millennial-ish. How about
millennial-ish, yes. Millennial at heart. Definitely.
So, Joy, this is within my wheelhouse. I got a degree in psychology. So, one of my first questions is in regards to mental health, like what is the current state and some trends that you see?
So definitely with the coronavirus, I think we're seeing a lot of uncertainty. And so for some people, that can be really unsettling. And if you're already prone to feeling anxious or maybe even depressed, this could really sort of move the meter in terms of sort of maybe struggling to manage some of that anxiety or depression. So I think, on the one hand, we know that most people are probably feeling unsure. And on the other hand, for some folks, this might be a good time to reach out, maybe get more support because, again, we don't have a lot of answers. This isn't really something that we've ever faced, at least in my lifetime.
Another question is, is there a percentage of young Black women that are facing certain issues, or what's some common issues that someone like me or Sierra or around our age group might be suffering with?
So I work a lot with emerging adults,
Okay.
so that could be 18 to 29, and then also thinking about millennials, which, again, if you think about that period from maybe 18 to 35, it's a lot of transition, a lot of change. So people are, I see smiles already.
More to come on that.
Yes, people are making lots of decisions. So when you're 18, honestly, I would say 18 to 35, you could be making career decisions, thinking about pressures about what's next in terms of not only what you're majoring in or what you're studying, but what you want to do long term. Also, a time about relationships. People are making decisions about dating, about having children, marriage, sort of next steps. Just lots of transitions, lots of change. People may be moving. If you think about starting college, graduating, moving to a new city, being in a new place. So lots of change, lots of uncertainty, and which can be really exciting, but for a lot of people can be uncomfortable and can be a little scary. And so I think that's really one of the main reasons people start to seek out therapy.
I feel like you've been reading in my cell phone.
Was I reading your journal?
Everything that you just talked about are things that are going to come up throughout the season. Literally, everything.
Yeah.
So, wow, we connected in the first day, and here we are. We're reading each other's minds.
Yeah.
Stop. But when she was talking about people starting to go out and seek help, I know you know what I've been through in the last few months, 7 months. I finally was like, okay, let me go find somebody. But then it's very discouraging when you're trying to find somebody to talk to, and either they cost a lot of money, they don't take insurance, or they aren't accepting new patients. And if they are accepting new patients, it may be 2-3 weeks before you're even able to get in. So what do you say to those people that they want help, but then they feel a little defeated? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, it's really challenging, I think, to not only find help, but find a good fit, because you may find someone and then find that it's not quite as comfortable as you expected. And there are some resources out there, but I think sometimes what happens, especially for people of color, self-included, we may wait a little bit too late. And so it can be good, I think, to start to look for help at the first sort of red flag or first warning. Sometimes.
What would be a red flag?
So, if you sort of notice maybe things are shifting in terms of your mood, maybe you're feeling a little bit more irritable than normal, maybe you're not getting as much rest, could be your appetite is changing, you might be eating more, eating less, maybe you just can't concentrate. So things that are normally pretty easy for you to do take a longer amount of time. That's a good time to maybe check in, as opposed to, when you get to a place where you can't sleep at all, you can't eat at all, you can't make it to work. And knowing, kind of like Sierra said, that there might be a wait to see someone, but it's a little bit easier to manage the 2 to 3 weeks than it might be like when you're in the midst of the crisis.
So I'm from a small town, so I moved to Atlanta, and then I moved here to Maryland, and I didn't realize you have to wait for doctors. You have to wait for a counselor. So moving here, I knew that I would be going through a lot of changes, and so I tried to go to a counselor here, and I got one, and I didn't really click with her that much. I mean, she was nice, but I asked her, I'm like, hey, can I get more than one session a month? And she was like, no, you're fine. A month is good. So then I waited another month, and I met with her again, and I said, okay, well, hey, is it okay? Can I get another month? And she was like, nope, I'll talk to you next time. Click. So I do like video chat with my the counselor that I had at the time. So I called my insurance company, and they basically said it was up to the discretion of the counselor on how many sessions that I get. So I decided to switch counselors. And then my job needed me for something, and so I had to wait. Or cancel an appointment, and then they scheduled it 1 month out. Wow. So I waited that 1 month, and then they called and canceled for the next month. So needless to say, I still haven't seen a counselor, but I don't know what to do in that scenario. It's not like anything is wrong where I need to see someone, but enough to where I'm like, hey, I'm going through a lot of changes. I need someone to talk to. You're just trying to
get that check-in right now instead of waiting until you get to the breaking point.
Yeah. And it's very frustrating and unfortunately I hear that a lot, that people, when they finally make the decision, I do think it's a big decision. It takes a lot of courage to finally reach out, seek help, and it can be really defeating when you do that and then you still can't get what you want. There are some ways or even resources that can help. There's a resource called Therapy for Black Girls that actually lists therapists that are women of color sort of across the country. There's another really good one called the Shrink Space, which helps you find resources of people that are currently taking clients. Because sometimes you might look at a website and it may not be up to date. Even something like Psychology Today, where you can search by not only by insurance, but by gender, race, expertise. And I always say, like, I'm very quick to ask someone for a recommendation when I want to get my hair braided or get my nails done. And so we also need to think about maybe asking people if they know someone, or, maybe they've gone to counseling before and they can help you find someone. Maybe even within your church. I know my pastor is very pro mental health. He has a therapist. And so even thinking about resources within the faith community, and eventually maybe as you're waiting to see a licensed professional, you might be able to get support some other ways. So I think the goal is not to get so frustrated that you give up, but to really think about kind of weighing your options.
Okay. What are some things like we can look for a counselor? Like, I know me, I read the bio. I want to see where they went to school. I like to see a face because I want to see if they seem personable.
If they look like you. We want them to look like us.
I do want someone to look like me. I've been to people that haven't looked like me, and they were great. I will say, I think I told you the story before, but I went to counseling like a long time ago before I ever moved. And I was talking to the counselor about some of my childhood. And she was like, "Oh, I really feel bad for you." And she was like, "You're going to make me cry." And I know counselors aren't supposed to cry. And she was like, "Just the way that you are as an adult and what you've been through, I can't, like, that was a lot for her, right?" I stopped going to her.
Yeah, which is a good sign. I think that's like you made
sign.
the right call in terms of not continuing to go.
But you know why I stopped going to her? It was because she was blind, and she could never see me. And I felt like, I'm like, man, if she feels bad for me and she's blind, like,
you don't want someone looking in your
eyes.
eyes.
I didn't want sympathy. I don't know. I wanted validation, but I wanted my counselor to be able to give me a some action steps to take. And I felt like if you feel sorry enough for me, you feel like, I don't know, like I can handle it, or, I don't know. It's a lot.
It's a lot. And I think you do want to go to a counselor that's pretty stable. So I always think about, I wouldn't go to a dentist if they weren't going to the dentist or getting regular cleanings. And so you want to make sure, I would encourage people to make sure the person is licensed. And there are a lot of people that may identify themselves as counselors, but may not be licensed mental health professionals or psychologists.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that
was a thing.
Yeah, there are even some famous folks that are probably not licensed, but they have television shows and they give lots of advice. And so it can actually be sort of dangerous. So yeah, you want to make sure the person is licensed. You also want to make sure, again, when people are licensed, that means they have to get ongoing education and get a certain number of hours per year to kind of maintain their credentials. You also want to look at where they went to school. Is that place accredited? Again, there are some schools that provide degrees, but maybe not accreditation. So again, you want to be mindful of that. And also their areas of expertise. You could have someone that's really good with depression or anxiety, but may not have experience with other areas. And so again, I would encourage people to ask, do you have experience working with Black women, and sort of kind of how might your approach with me look different than with someone else? And if they're not comfortable talking about race or gender, then that would be a red flag for me, because again, how could they not sort of see that part of you, in your race, your gender, how that might impact the reason that you're coming in? So I think generally, you also want to look at reviews. Sometimes people have reviews out there.
That's true.
I know I look at Yelp when I go to restaurants and other places. So again, I think sometimes that can also help too with word of mouth. So there's some things that can help. The other thing, and this might not be as popular, but I would also encourage you to give the person maybe more than one session before you make a decision.
I gave my last person 2.
Yeah.
Is that enough? I gave him 2.
If I'm paying,
Well, it was free, but I gave
both
him
sessions
2.
are free?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But if you really need help, I would say maybe 2. Maybe
Right.
1 depends on what help you need. If you are okay, but you know you can wait a little bit longer. 3, I feel like 3 is like
3 is reasonable, but I think it's part of it is that sometimes you feel worse before you feel better. And so if you're going to counseling and talking about things that are difficult or, make you feel sad or upset, you might not leave the first time and things are better. So if you've been struggling with something for years, it may not get better in 2 or 3 sessions.
So
it
don't
may
go
take
based off
time.
feeling. Got it.
Yeah. So again, I mean, you want to be comfortable with the person. You want to make sure they're competent, that they're present, they're not on the phone while you're in the session.
Scrolling.
You have their full attention. Because again, I've heard stories. But you also want to be realistic with your own expectations. And there are people that I've worked with for short-term counseling, people I work with for long-term counseling. It just really is. Sometimes it just takes a little bit more time than we think. It's not like going to a medical, your primary care doctor who might give you a prescription and you feel better the next week. Sometimes these things just take time to figure out.
But I like the way that you said you kind of like interview them in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how are you going to work with me?
Yeah.
What can you bring to me? I didn't think to do that, but
yeah,
That's a
ask them
good thing
what's their approach and what's their experience like. I mean, we interview people before we go on dates. We do some Google searches.
I don't do that.
Oh, see, I'm bad.
I mean, you may check some things out. So
I like being analytical, and I like the seeing what I can find out about you without you telling me.
So you look them up? You look a guy up?
Oh, I will. I haven't. I've been on dates, and I was like, man, I should have really looked this person up.
sometimes you should.
But I'm gonna start. But I like to meet people in person, and I like to say, okay, I can. My major psychology, so I'm pretty much like reading people,
The whole
everything.
time.
Yes, everything. I do have another question. Us being Black women, and I know for me, the first time I ever went to counseling, and I haven't been that many times. Let me clarify. I've said I haven't been that many times, but I know when I went to tell my dad, he was kind of like, why are you going to counseling? What did you need to go to counseling for? You know, even knowing my background, even knowing what I've been through as a kid and stuff like that, it was more so like, you can go to church and talk to your pastor. But again, I'm from a small town, so they think you can just walk up to the pastor and say, hey, come talk to me. And that's not the case. And I guess what advice would you give someone who needs to talk to their parent, who loves their parents, want them to buy into counseling? I know for me, I was just kind of like, I'm doing this. And then I just kept talking to my parent about it, my dad specifically about it. And then eventually he bought into it. But what if someone really is like, I'm struggling, but my parent is like, no, you can't, like, go to the preacher, don't go to counseling. What can that person do?
How old were you?
I might have been
Like your early 20s?
very early 20s.
Yeah. Well, I mean, on the one hand, I think it's great if they buy into it. And on the other hand, especially if you're talking early 20s or even, I mean, in Maryland, over 16, you don't necessarily have to get them to buy in or have their permission in order to seek help. So working with college students, I know that for many of them, they've been waiting to have an opportunity to go to counseling and not have to maybe worry about their parents getting involved or using their parents' insurance. And even for people beyond that age, it may be something that you just choose not to share with everyone. I know that there's certainly been times when I've gone to counseling and people have known, other times when they haven't known. And it doesn't really change the outcome, because if your goal is for you in terms of getting better, your own self-care, people may buy in when they see you're getting better. And so maybe that's sort of what they might need to actually sort of think about counseling as beneficial or helpful. But I wouldn't let that prevent you necessarily from going. And again, I think sometimes even when you look at churches or sort of even some of the messages from the pulpit about seeking help, that honestly made a difference for me in terms of where I decided to join a church. I wouldn't feel comfortable going to a church where they don't think that therapy is of God, because, God, I'm a Christian and I'm a psychologist. We do exist. So I'd actually want to find a pastor that has a therapist and is not sort of trying to overstep and provide therapy. Maybe even a pastor that knows when to take a sabbatical or a rest. So less like good modeling, right?
It's happening now.
So yeah. So I think it's just really important that unfortunately, people may not always buy in. I will say too that I have worked with people, and even millennials, late 30s folks, that will actually bring a family member into the session. So not necessarily family therapy per se, but sometimes it makes a difference. If that person can sort of see the psychologist, see who they're working with, that then they may have a different idea. They might be picturing Dr. Phil and not necessarily me. And so I think that can also help people kind of sell therapy to their family members, or maybe even, if they're in a relationship, be able to sell it to their partner.
So as you're talking about selling it to, their family and their partners, when you're in college, I went through college, I didn't know anything about any type of service, and I don't know if we just didn't have it back in 2004 to 2008 in North Carolina, but I didn't know anything about that. I knew career services, financial aid, sports, like that was it.
Yeah.
So where do students get that information?
So, when I first moved to Maryland, my first job was at Morgan State University in their counseling center. So at a historically Black college, counseling services are there. So sometimes we just don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
They exist. I would say most college counseling centers, especially in 2020, offer some kind of services or resources, even in community colleges. And so most of the services are free, which is also a bonus. I wish that I had gone to counseling when I was an undergrad, because as part of what I think the problem is that often people worry about the cost or using insurance, and most college counseling centers don't require that. So you get maybe a certain number of sessions per academic year. And even if you are a graduate student, those services are available. So yeah, I would encourage people to look, or if some of the millennials that are listening are parents or have younger siblings, to encourage them to go, because it really is more convenient, I think, than when you're trying to find counseling and you're working full time or doing other things.
And then also it may be good to start like when you're in college, and then when you become an adult, like you've already got that rhythm.
Yeah.
You're already, on the right path, and it's not like, oh wait, now I have a crisis, I got to find somebody.
Right.
You have learned all these tools throughout your years from your psychologist.
Just think about how your life might be different if you had seen someone your first year of college, maybe your senior year.
There's
maybe
a lot of
throughout.
Decisions I wouldn't have made.
Right.
Probably.
So it does set the tone. And I think counseling too is something that we have to think about, is maybe it is something you do at various points in your life, that just because you go one time doesn't mean that you're cured. Just like you go see your primary care doctor, you see your dentist, you see your hairstylist, right? You don't just stop going because your hair looked good one time, right? So I think we just have to be mindful of like reasons to go, so that we're not sort of waiting until it's too late.
Yeah. I know it's kind of later in the episode, but can you give us a definition of mental health?
I think for me, mental health is sort of associated with self-care, and we need to take care of our physical body in terms of what we eat, what we drink, exercise. We need to take care of our mind. And so giving ourselves permission to rest, giving ourselves permission to connect, giving ourselves permission to be uncertain or feel what we're feeling. Because sometimes I think we get messages, especially as Black women, that we have to be strong, we have to take care of other people. And so I think the best kind of self-care is, if you can take care of yourself, I think you're more likely to be able to be available to other people. So if we were all practicing self-care, I think we'd see a lot of changes in our relationships, in our families, and maybe even in our lifespan. I think people would live just a little bit longer, and maybe sort of connect a little bit better.
One thing for my mental health that I've recently instituted for myself, I'm gonna start taking mental health days.
Amen.
From work.
Yeah.
Because work is real stressful, and I told myself this years ago. I'm like, I'm gonna do it once a month. I have so much sick leave, I might as well, but I haven't. And last Thursday I sure did. I woke up in the morning, I said, I just cannot do it today.
Yeah.
I can't. So I just called. I was like, I'm not feeling too good. I'm not gonna be able to make it in today. I didn't call it a mental health day, but that's essentially what it was, because I just knew if by that Thursday, like Friday, I would have spazzed on somebody, because it's just, I was almost at that breaking point of the stress of work, and I just needed that day to just sit at home and just do a face mask and lay on my couch and watch old episodes of a guilty pleasure show that I'm not going to say, but it comes on Bravo.
Well, I think you do have to schedule mental health days. I had a mentor years ago when I first started in counseling, and she did once a month. We knew she was out. And she's still in the field, and that's probably why, because she was taking those mental health days. And so I don't think we need to be ashamed or even be like shy about it. I feel like that should be the norm. Like, especially when you think about other countries, people take siestas, businesses close early, things shut down, and that's just not the norm here. But that doesn't mean that it can't be in 5-10 years from now.
I think
We pray for that.
For me, on my 30th birthday, I went to Cancun, and I realized, like, I worked that whole year, probably 2 years, and never took a break. My job at the time, they really didn't give PTO. You could, like, ask for time off, but there was no PTO time. So I felt
Which is personal time off, right?
Yes. Thank you. So I just didn't feel like I could take time off. And so I realized that I was just overworking myself for no reason, and just, I don't know why I just had this workaholic mentality. And so eventually I started incorporating a balance. So now, like, I might leave my computer at work. I may just go leave work on time, and then I don't think about work. I kind of don't want to talk to anybody from work. So those are my clear boundaries, and I feel like that's been really helpful for me.
And I love that you use the word boundaries, because I think that's what really mental health is all about, is being able to set boundaries, set limits, even if it is like just making a decision that you're not going to check your email when you're not at work, or that you're going to leave on time. There's even a lot of research about happiness and habits of happy people. Happy people actually use their vacation time, so they don't leave it on the table. So it's almost like they are looking forward to, or sort of have the anticipation of the vacation that kind of lifts their mood. And then when they take the vacation, they come back with memories, right? And so you can hold on to memories much longer than you can hold on to a bag or some shoes or something else. And so it's sort of like that idea that the happiness meter keeps going up when you do things like that, as opposed to when you don't.
But then the only thing about that is when you come back from the trip, you got to plan another one. So you have something else to look forward to. And you guys wonder why I'm always going somewhere.
No, I don't wonder. I want to go
with
with
me.
you. Right.
You're like, are you in town? Yes.
Yes.
So do you have anything else right now? I was going to ask a question that's personal to me. It's not happening as much right now because everyone's focused on Corona. But when there was all the shootings that were happening of the unarmed Black men and women, I would have to go to work like the next day.
Right.
And I think that kind of does mess with your mental health, because you have to act like nothing changed, and there's a lot of people that look like the officers at work. And then there's you, and they're talking to you like nothing happened, and deep down you're like, yo, like my Black community, like, we're suffering right now. This is happening over and over and over again. So when they tell you to bring your best self to work, or your whole self to work, but you can't always do that. You got to keep some things into yourself. What do you say to the millennials who may be experiencing things like that right now, where stuff is hitting them really hard in their community at home, but they've got to go to class, or, you know, they have to go to work, and they have to look at people like nothing happened and keep a smile on their face when really they don't feel like smiling?
Yeah, there was a hashtag a couple years ago that was "racial trauma is real."
It is real.
I think when I think about, we often see things, and especially with social media, we can get inundated with those images and seeing things over and over. And there are people that look like us, or look like our brothers, our sisters, our moms, our dads. And it can be really overwhelming. And I think it's unrealistic for us to go in and act as if nothing is happening. And so sometimes people will encourage you to kind of set some limits, right, in terms of how much exposure you get, whether it's on social media or watching the news, maybe even limiting the time you spend, but also having support. So whether there are people at work or outside of work that you can talk to, be yourself. Because I think we also experience a lot of microaggression. So, there could be things happening in the news, and then we go to work and people are doing things that are just a little shady. And sometimes it can be hard to interpret, like, did they say that because I was Black, because I was a woman? Was it some other reason? And so when you have people you can kind of check in with, I think it makes a difference so that you're not alone.
Watch a documentary.
Right.
And go to work.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember watching the Sandra Bland documentary on HBO and feeling like I needed to take a mental health day the next day. Because, I mean, it's real. Like, that could easily have been
anybody,
any of us. And so, yeah, I think it's also important in times like that you are probably even more intentional about your self-care. So are you sleeping? Like, are you eating? Are you getting outside? Are you, like, taking some time for yourself? Maybe even, and again, this might sound strange, but just like exploring your relationship with silence, right? So often we get rewarded for doing more than one thing at a time, multitasking. What would it be like to just sit and breathe for a couple minutes?
Thank you for bringing that up, because a lot of people, I found that they do not like to be alone or can't sit within themselves, which is weird. I found it weird. It might not be weird to other people.
Because you're an introvert.
I am an introvert, but I have extrovert tendencies. Like,
right.
I'll go a week and I'm around people every day and I'm like, oh no, I need one day by myself. And so, is there something to be said for people who do not like to be alone?
I think that's a lot of people. I mean, it's normal and natural, just like it is for folks that like need that time to kind of regroup. But I think sometimes we need to think about what is it that makes us uncomfortable about being alone. And sometimes we're so busy, we don't really have time to think about why we do the things that we do. So I would encourage people to even think about how they might develop a meditation practice, or even just practicing mindfulness, meaning just being present in what you do. So it could be something as simple as brushing your teeth. Like, hopefully people are brushing their teeth every day. But instead of thinking about what you have to do next, or what happened the night before, or what your day is going to be like, what would it be like just to focus on how it feels to hold the toothbrush?
That's
and
awesome.
What the water feels like, or the toothpaste tastes like, and like as a way of sort of slowing things down. Because again, it could be driving, it could be washing dishes, it could just be paying attention to sort of what it's like to walk from your car to the building, wherever you're headed. Because again, I think oftentimes we're just doing too much, right?
Thinking about the next step.
Yeah, and that's when people get anxious. So a lot of times when people experience anxiety, they're thinking about what has happened, what could happen, as opposed to just being, which again, I think doesn't cost a lot, right? To just be present.
Yeah. Here's a question. Do you think there is a such thing as too much self-care?
I'm a little biased, so I'm probably going to say no. But I guess if your self-care is interfering with your responsibilities, but again, for me, self-care could be as simple as just getting rest. So I know I look a little bit different and act a little different if I get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, as opposed to if I get less. So again, it doesn't cost me anything to sleep, right? But if someone's sleeping 12 hours, that there might be some consequences, right? So I don't know if it's too much, but if it's interfering. And so I think we also have to look at how we define self-care. Because for me, that might be rest, like doing things I'm interested in. Like right now, basketball is gone. That's a struggle for me, right? But finding things that are like pleasurable interests. But if you love to travel and you can't stop traveling, and all of a sudden you've maxed out your credit cards or you can't afford it, maybe that's too much self-care. Like, you might need to look at other ways. But I think it is kind of maybe thinking about things is not in terms of extremes, but kind of what's going to keep you stable and steady.
That's good.
Well, you said basketball. You know, we've been to many a games together. Flew all the way across the country to go see LeBron play the Cavs in LA this January. The beginning of January. That was a fun trip.
And LeBron is the GOAT. Just want to put that out there.
I will actually agree. I was a LeBron fan, but seeing him in real life, it's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And seeing him in the Staples Center, it was kind of weird. But because the Staples Center, to me, being from Arizona, the Staples Center meant Kobe, because we couldn't get past them in any type of playoff situation. We had to beat LA or Utah. LA always beat us. So that's what I think of when I think about the Staples Center. And it was very difficult to hear about Kobe.
Yeah.
And I know that the NBA world, the entire world, mourned Kobe. But one thing I noticed is that a lot of the athletes really were vulnerable, and you saw them cry. You saw them post things. I still see Allen Iverson. He'll throw something up there, and I'm like, I loved AI growing up. I was a baller. I don't look like it now, but I was a little point guard back in the day, so he was my favorite player. And to see that he's still struggling, I know they're all human. They have superhuman basketball abilities, but they are really human, and it's nice to see it, but it's like, are we seeing it now because it's Kobe? Or is it something that people are finally opening up about their own mental health in general, and now we're seeing it posted?
Yeah, I think it's both. I mean, I think Kobe is just someone that in some ways maybe I feel like everybody grew up with. He's a household name. And even after he retired, seeing him with his daughter, I think people just really appreciated that relationship. And so for him to die like so suddenly, tragically, I don't think anybody would have anticipated that, was a loss for the country, like for the nation. I mean, really even just beyond the country, sort of the world. And I also think that it probably triggered reactions in other people that may have been grieving. So if you've lost someone else or a recent loss, I think, again, not only are you maybe grieving Kobe, but thinking about those other losses you might have experienced. And so I do think, in some ways, people like AI or LeBron, like so many NBA players, had to sort of deal with that in the public eye. And I think it really kind of opened our eyes to maybe seeing them vulnerable. And we don't always see people like especially Allen Iverson or a LeBron James, even Shaq, like people that had complicated relationships with Kobe. I think we don't always see them being vulnerable. So I think that brought up a lot of feelings, and people were almost given permission to feel them because of the magnitude of the loss. On the other hand, I also feel like there are some NBA players more recently, within the last couple of years, that have also come out about struggling with depression, anxiety. So Kevin Love, who played with the 2016 world champion Cleveland Cavaliers,
you had to say that.
To throw that in.
Okay.
But he's had a pretty public campaign about dealing with anxiety, to the point where he had to leave games and people were unsure sort of what was happening. There was another player that played for the Toronto Raptors that kind of had similar struggles. So the NBA, prior to Kobe's death, had made moves to kind of make sure that players had access to psychologists and mental health treatment. But it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. A lot of the NBA players are emerging adults, millennials. They're making big decisions, have a lot of pressure. So it might not be on the magnitude of sort of what we might experience financially, but just think about what it'd be like to sort of be expected to win a championship or expected to score a certain amount of points, get a certain amount of rebounds every night.
And you're like 23 years old.
Right.
They're young.
And you're getting millions of dollars at 19. Like, I'm thinking about someone like Zion Williamson, like in New Orleans, who all of a sudden, after 1 year in college, is expected to like carry a team.
A whole team on his back.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. So I feel like they feel pressure just like we do. And so I think it's important that they, in some ways, maybe they can help other athletes or other people just know that you're not alone if you're struggling, or you don't have to sort of struggle by yourself. So I think the NBA was moving in that direction, but losing Kobe, I think really maybe brought some people to light that weren't public in terms of feeling their feelings, which I actually think will be helpful as they move forward.
And I also, I wonder, like within the next few months, if there's gonna be a trend of more men that are going to seek help just because they're seeing, the person they look up to,
right,
finally opening up.
I hope so. I mean, because I do feel like there are, just the research and just, anecdotally, I think more women seek help than men, but there are a lot of men and even men of color that are providing counseling services. Some of them are even going into the barbershops and going into the locker room. So it doesn't always have to be in the traditional way that we think about it. But I think when people have like the public eye and can really advocate, it makes a huge difference for maybe the person that's kind of on the fence. Knowing that someone like LeBron practices mindfulness or meditates, that might make them a little bit more willing to consider it. Or, if your pastor has a therapist, you probably are going to consider that again, as opposed to if you have someone telling you don't go to therapy.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't know how to segue from that, but can you just give us like some low cost, so we're not millionaires, we don't have a lot of money. Can you just tell us some ways we can do self-care or, some effective ways for self-care on a low budget?
For sure. Because I think, the biggest one I would say is sleep or sleep hygiene. People get paid just to research our sleep. And so I think if you can try to develop a routine that kind of allows you to get between 7 to 9 hours of sleep, and just notice if that makes a difference. I know you're already looking at each other.
Oh,
like,
I do that
what?
because, I don't go to sleep until like midnight, but I go to work late. So I make sure I get my hours in.
You get your 7,
I get them in.
Your 7 and 9.
I do. I get 8.
Okay.
So mine is a little bit, sometimes I get a lot of sleep and then I go some weeks and I don't get enough, but I try.
And I think, people will even think about ways that they can kind of get into a regular routine. So if you have a set time that you can go to sleep every night, or a set time you wake up, even on the weekends, maybe even thinking about what you do before you go to sleep. And so, again, there's research about what happens with the blue light on our phone, reserving your bed for sleep and sex, and the sort of not work or school or other things. You don't really want to be on your laptop in bed. Even just thinking about your eating habits. So it may just be making sure you eat 3 meals a day, and that, as much as you can, trying to have healthy meals, because that also impacts your mood. I would say in times like this with the coronavirus, and we're all supposed to be doing our social distancing and kind of staying away, seeing if you can just get outside, like to get some physical activity or exercise. So it may not be what you normally do, but making sure, especially again, as the seasons are changing, that you get some daylight hours in. Also limiting your technology use. And so again, that might be unpopular, especially with emerging adults or millennials. But I'll say that a lot of the clients that I work with that kind of have like investigated their relationship with technology or social media tend to feel a little bit more confident and at ease. And so it's not to say it's all or nothing, but maybe putting some limits on how often you use it or where you use it, and just seeing what that looks like, because none of those things cost money. And so again, I think they could be subtle ways to kind of shift how you take care of yourself, but have the potential to have a big difference.
So I fasted from social media before, and that was helpful. I've gotten a weighted blanket. I try to spray like lavender sleep spray sometimes. That's a little helpful. I do have a little, should I tell you guys, I have a little nightlight. So I don't know, sometimes that's helpful.
Yeah.
But I have a nightlight. It's the kind that's supposed to pull out the negative ions.
Oh, nice. I'm not that fancy.
You can get that at Lowe's.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't cost much.
Setting up your room as
It's
a
like a
place
cute
for
night.
relaxation,
Yeah.
right? A place you feel comfortable, so you actually look forward to going to bed or going to sleep. It makes a difference. So I like that you mentioned like the lavender or the essential oils, because a lot of times, again, we take those things for granted. So even things that you can do to maybe involve all of your senses kind of goes back to the mindfulness. So paying attention to what you can see, what you can hear, what you can smell. Those are things you can do before bed, but they could also be good during the day. So if you have a little lavender, rosemary, some other scent, maybe that helps you from not going off on your coworker or the person that's getting on your nerves. But again, just giving yourself permission to kind of take those little breaks. And it could be in terms of how you get to sleep or how you rest, but it could be things you're doing during the day.
And I'm trying to get into meditation a little bit. I know it's been difficult. Just like 1 minute, I'm good. 3 minutes, I'm good. Around about 5 minutes, I'm like, I really don't feel like sitting here. So
Yeah.
I guess it's progression, and I'll get used to it. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into that a little bit.
I'm glad you said that because that's pretty normal
Okay.
when you're starting to do meditation. So I'm actually certified now to teach something called Koru mindfulness and meditation.
I meant to bring that up.
But it's specifically for emerging adults, or at least that's how it was designed. And so they actually offer meditation at like 10-minute intervals because it can be really hard to sit for 30 minutes, 60 minutes, especially when you're just starting. So we often talk about it like building your mindfulness muscle. So just like if you start training for a marathon, you probably aren't running as fast the first week as you are the second or the third. And so it's like the more you practice, maybe you notice if you practice for 10 minutes this week, maybe the first week you're getting distracted after the first minute or the third, but maybe the second week you're going a little bit longer. You might start to look for a 15-minute meditation or 20-minute. So I think it's like also giving yourself permission to get distracted because that's what happens. Our minds wander.
It's normal.
Yes, our thoughts that's just what our brains do. So if you actually notice that, you're practicing mindfulness. So if you notice your thoughts have wandered away from your breath or the meditation, just kind of pat yourself on the back like, okay, I noticed that. I'm being mindful. Come back and then start over. And so I think it is like being a little bit more gentle and kind with yourself. So you may find that there's some days you feel really distracted. So maybe you need to pause and attend to whatever it is that's distracting you. And other days you might find that you get through the 10 minutes and you feel energized. So I think it is kind of just thinking about it as like building your mindfulness muscle.
So, sorry. One thing you've said during this podcast that stuck out to me personally was permission. Like, give yourself permission. Like, it's okay. Certain feelings to feel them. Give yourself permission to, try different things or
Take off work for
mental health day. Like, that's good because oftentimes I know as Black women or, in general, we sometimes are hard on ourselves and don't want to give ourselves like credit or, the ability to rest and relax. So
yes.
I think
Relax,
that's awesome.
relate, release.
Yes.
That's like my favorite Different World episode. But kind of like what you said, though, your feelings are your feelings. They're not right or wrong. So what you do with them could lead to very different consequences, right? But if you're angry, you're angry. Anger is not a bad or good emotion. If you're sad, you're sad. But I think sometimes we get messages maybe from our childhood, from society about what's considered appropriate or not. But your feelings are your feelings. So I think sometimes when you tune into them, they can actually be informative, help you make decisions, help you to feel better. So I think when we try to kind of push them away, ignore them, act like they don't exist, they don't really go away. And they can build up and start to come out in ways that aren't really productive. So I think if you're maybe tuning in and being a little bit more gentle and kind, you might see a different result.
I don't know if you listen to Malik, but she says feelings aren't facts. So I've been replaying that. Malik Teal.
Oh, okay. Feelings aren't facts.
Yes.
Yeah, they fluctuate and they're fluid and they vary. But I mean, again, they're your feelings. So I think that there's a really good meditation that people can listen to that can be 10 minutes or 20. It's called a loving kindness meditation. But it's really an opportunity to kind of just tune in to that part of you that maybe needs to take care of yourself a little bit better. Because again, I think as Black women, we're often very good at taking care of other people. So what would happen if we were just a little bit more loving and kind to ourselves?
Can we find this on YouTube?
I was about to ask you, where do you find that?
Yeah, so there's a really good one on the Koru mindfulness website, and it's a free website.
Like
you can
free.
listen.
Koru,
Yeah, it's
like
a free meditation.
Koru.
There's also something called Insight Timer, which is an app that's free, and you can actually go on the app and decide how long you want to meditate. So if you have 5 minutes, 10, 20, you can find the meditation for you, and probably on YouTube. I mean, if you Google loving kindness, lots of things will come up. But again, if you want some that are kind of backed by science or research, tried and true, those are some good places to try. There's also one called Liberate, which is actually for people of color. And so again, addresses issues around racial trauma, microaggressions, things like that. That one is also free. So I'd say if people are thinking about what's one thing I can start or try today, why not just listen to a guided meditation and just see what you notice. There's not a right or wrong way to do it, but it's more about tuning in to kind of what happens when you are listening.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That is. Thank you. Thank you. Like, just the part when you said when you're brushing your teeth.
Yes.
Like feeling the toothbrush, feeling the water, tasting the toothpaste. Like,
Yeah.
you don't even think about that stuff. You're always like, okay, what time is it? I got to get out of here. But that's what I'm going to do that tonight.
Yeah.
And tomorrow morning.
Even if you think about taking a shower, that's another good way to practice mindfulness.
That's my outlet.
Yeah.
Long showers.
Yeah. Taking a walk where you, again, maybe aren't listening to music, where you're not on your phone, and just tuning in to maybe what you can hear when you're walking, what you can see. Even paying attention to things that are different in your neighborhood, right? I remember Sierra was telling me about her neighbor's tree and how it had leaves. I thought, have I noticed if my tree has leaves? House, yeah. Right? So just thinking about slowing down. So I'm so quick to back out the garage and get going instead of maybe looking around and noticing, right? So again, it makes a huge difference, I think, when we just kind of can slow down. And again, research suggests we're probably more productive when we practice mindfulness. And even in terms of relationships, romantic ones, couples that practice mindfulness tend to have better communication and feel a little bit more connected.
This is just kind of segues into the next question, kind of. So I know with your profession, you get all kind of things coming at you left and right, people with different questions, people going through different things, and it can be hard. So tell us some ways that you practice self-care.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things I do is yoga. So I make sure that's on my schedule at least twice a week. Sometimes one class is probably more active and moving, which Sierra has participated
that's the one I went to?
in.
Yes.
Oh, man. And then another one that's more like restorative, kind of relaxing. I also just make time to do things I like to do. Like I love music. So if I haven't gone to a concert in a while, like I notice that, right? So I put those things on my schedule. I mentioned basketball is a big one, not just watching, but like actually going to the games. Even things like just staying connected with my family, making sure I have time for them and friends. Community service, which again, people might not always associate with self-care, but there's also a lot of research going back to like habits of happy people. There's actually a longer lifespan for people that volunteer on a regular basis versus people that don't. So there's something about like giving of yourself that makes a difference. And the other thing I'll say that, again, is not always as popular is I'm really good at saying no. And so no is like my final answer, and there's no explanation. Like I can't do everything or be there for everybody. And so I'm pretty good at setting limits and also saying yes to things I enjoy, like things, for me, things that are pleasurable to the point where you could lose track of time when you were doing them. So that could be many things for many people, but it's kind of like the idea of you get into a flow and it's like, you look up and maybe an hour has passed. And so I would say yes to those things and maybe say no to things that you feel like overextend you or leave you feeling really exhausted or tired.
I think you dropped a lot of gems on this podcast. We definitely want to leave one positive vibe here, and it's basically a quote that I read recently, and it's every storm runs out of rain. So I just want to leave everyone with that. If they're ever going through anything, it'll pass. But with that, we do want to say thank you for joining us. I feel like this was an excellent
first guest.
Yeah, I won't say it's the best episode, but it's the best episode because it's the first one. And I feel like you did a great job. Thank you so much.
First and the finest, right?
Yes.
I almost did it. I wasn't going to do it in the mic, but we are the first and the finest. Okay.
Oh, gosh. Okay.
But yes, thank you. We are so thankful that you're here, and we may be tapping on you again because when you were talking about couples and doing the mindfulness, I need to hear more about that. I mean, I'm single, but I might need to tap on you for that.
Okay.
Yes, definitely come back. We have a lot more questions if we didn't ask enough this episode.
And thank you. I want to just give you both a shout out for talking about mental health, especially on your first episode, because I think it sort of sets the tone in terms of self-care and loving yourself and all that Black girl magic stuff.
Yes.
And so I'm just glad that you're willing, because you never know who's listening or who kind of might hear this, and that might make a difference in terms of them being on the fence about reaching out, or maybe someone that's been like anti anti-counseling in the past, maybe they can hear something that you all have said or I've said, and that might be the sort of the push that they need to reconsider. So
that would be awesome.
You.
Can you tell people where we can find you?
You can find me.
You can find her on our website.
Yeah. All right, on our website. That's great.
You can send us some messages right directly. DM us, The Real Play Podcast on IG. And if you have any questions, we will definitely take them. We'll get the answers for you, and we'll get right back.
Yeah, please leave us a review, comment, subscribe to this podcast. We'll love to hear from you. And with that, we're out. Thank you, guys. Bye. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on all social media platforms at The Real Play Podcast.
We would love to hear from you, so leave us a comment, DM, or voice note. And don't forget to come hang out with us on our next episode.